hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. The magnificent 8-second instrumental that you just heard is one of my favorites and definitely among the finest put together by the superhuman rhythm section of Sly and Robbie Shakespeare, a duo that went down as the most prolific force in reggae history with an influence that stretches into different genres. It's often said that if you've heard 10 reggae songs, at least 5 of them have Sly and Robbie on the record, and they've also been called upon to weave their magic for rock and pop royalty like Herbie Hancock, the Rolling Stones, and even Bob Dylan. But on top of deploring their brilliance for established legends, I believe one of their most remarkable achievements was how they catapulted a then unknown Jamaican-born pop and disco singer into global acclaim at the dawn of the 1980s. This singer, called Grace Jones, was stuck in a zone as an icon in a fringe underground disco scene that was quickly dying out and going out of style when Island Records boss Chris Blackwell would discover her unreal potential and combine her unusual style with the irresistible reggae force of Sly and Robbie. Blackwell would put the musicians in the now legendary Compass Point Studios, and the result was a groundbreaking series of albums that pushed the boundaries of popular sound, incorporating rock, pop, soul and funk, and placed them all on a reggae foundation and made Grace Jones one of the most iconic artists of the late 20th century. Let's take a look at the Sly and Robbie Masterclass that made Grace Jones a global superstar. And this story begins with Grace Jones. She was born Grace Beverly Jones on May 19, 1948 in Spanish Town into a strict Pentecostal Christian home. And while she was still very young, her parents emigrated to the US and left her in the care of her strict grandmother and very abusive step-grandfather. The extremely rigid and harsh environment in a grandma's home would sow the seeds of a rebellious streak that would manifest by the time she came of age. Freedom came to her at the age of 12 when her folks sent for her and her brother to come and live with them in New York. And by the time she got into her teens, she began to rebel against her parents by wearing makeup, going to parties, and hanging out with her friends. After graduating from community college, she immersed herself in the counterculture movement of the 1960s and left home to live in a hippie commune in Philadelphia before she moved back to New York. Her slim physique and striking features led her to become a model with a popular agency before moving to Paris in 1970 at the age of 22. Her unusual looks were a big hit on the Parisian fashion scene, and she would appear on the covers of many popular magazines like Elle and Vogue. And she even appeared on the cover of singer Billy Paul's album Ebony Woman. She was doing well in modeling, but deep down had a craving for music. While in Paris, she would record a song that caught the attention of popular American producer Tom Moulton, who was then making waves with disco cuts for artists like Gloria Gaynor and many others. Grace Jones moved back to New York in 1977 and recorded 3 disco albums that became pretty popular on the New York nightclub scene and was on rotation in popular spots like Studio 54. She was in a comfort zone as her eccentric personality and striking looks blended in perfectly with the excess of the disco era. But she was far from a star, and as the 1970s would wind down, disco dramatically fell out of favor and even faced outright hostility, as exemplified in what became known as Disco Demolition Night in Chicago, when a crate filled with disco records was blown up before a baseball game in 1979, an event that symbolized the end of the disco era. But as her run as a disco queen was ending, fate would indeed open an unexpected door. Her then boyfriend and visual artist, Jean-Paul Goude, had been making striking photo portraits of Grace, and one of them had her with a microphone in one hand, standing on one leg, barely dressed, and that picture would be published in the New York Magazine. One of the people that was stunned by that image was none other than Chris Blackwell. He didn't know much about her or her music, but he had heard that she was Jamaican, and from just looking at her, he just knew that she had the makings of a superstar. He would track her down and listen to her disco album portfolio. He was blown away by her looks and her voice, and knew immediately that what she needed to blow up would be an infusion of reggae energy. The first names that came to his mind were Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare. They were also in New York, so he called them up and invited them to his apartment and would play Grace's records to them to give them an idea of the task at hand. And to put together the songs that would make up her albums, he would put together a team and also hired Jamaican guitarist Mikey Chung, who was a member of Peter Tosh's band. as well as famous Jamaican percussionist Uzziah Sticky Thompson, plus French keyboardist Wally Baderu and British guitarist Barry Reynolds. And with his crew complete, Blackwell flew them all, plus Grace Jones, to the Bahamas, where he had built the Compass Point Studio 3 years earlier, a state-of-the-art facility in one of the most serene places on the planet. It was there that these musicians that came to be known as the Compass Point All-Stars would get to work on Grace's music. And to give the band an example of the kind of vibe they wanted for Grace's music, Sly and Robbie brought a tape of Black Uhuru's new third album, Sensimilla, and played it in the studio, and it would blow everyone's mind. Sound engineer Alex Satkin, who had done marvelous work on Bob Marley's 1979 album Survival, was thrilled to bits and on the spot decided that was going to be the sound of the new Grace Jones. On the morning that the recording was to start, Chris Blackwell and some band members wanted to rehearse, but Robbie Shakespeare, forever the firecracker, scoffed at the idea and insisted that as professionals, they should all take positions in the studio with their instruments, go with the flow, and cut the tracks on the fly. The first song they recorded was the Afro-pop charm titled Warm Leatherette that would showcase Grace Jones's stern, powerful voice, which she deployed in a semi-chanting and semi-toasting style that was a brilliant foil for Sly's explosive drumming. That song came together in no time, and the second song they recorded was the sublime Private Life. On this one, Grace Jones alternated between a poetry-like flow on the verses and hypnotic crooning on the hook. The instrumentals were anchored magnificently by Sly and Robbie to create an atmospheric and mesmerizing reggae beat that Robbie in particular murdered with his unstoppable bass line. Sly Dunbar, in a recent interview, said that Private Life was the Grace Jones song that he loved the most. The Compass Point All-Stars band would click like a Rolls-Royce engine, despite working together for the first time that morning, and by the time they were done with that track, Chris Blackwell was smiling from ear to ear. The songs were flowing at a smooth and rapid pace as they would record track after track in record time. But Grace's legendary temper would rise to the surface and in the process would bring one of her greatest songs into reality. Sly and Robbie had been considering using one of their instrumentals for Grace's project, and that beat in question was titled Peanut Butter, and the pair had made it for an artist named Junior Tucker as the B-side on a single. They had played it for Grace earlier, and once she heard it, she fell in love with the rhythm immediately. But when Blackwell heard it, he felt it was too close to R&B and not reggae enough, and told them to drop it. But when Grace came to the studio and heard that Blackwell had shut it down, she went totally ballistic. According to Sly, she'd been speaking in her American accent all the while, but that day, she went back to her Jamaican patois roots. She screamed at Robbie and said, "Call Chris on the phone now and give me back me rhythm." After loads of pressure, Blackwell would give in, and the rest is history. Grace and a friend named Dana, who was in the studio with her, on the spot wrote the lyrics to the song Pull Up to the Bumper, a 4 minutes and 48-second masterpiece that featured Grace Jones's imperious vocals, riding an unbelievably funky instrumental that was ably led by Sly Dunbar's metronomic drumming, in tandem with Robbie's mesmerizing and hypnotic bass line. In my humble opinion, it's one of the greatest instrumentals ever put together. It also became Grace Jones's signature track and her best-selling single till date. Grace Jones and Compass Point All-Stars would in 2 weeks record the 18 incredible songs that made up 1980's Warm Leatherette and 1981's Nightclubbing, and they assembled again for 1982's Living My Life. These first 3 albums catapulted Grace into a global superstar and would spearhead a reggae-centric trend that saw rock bands like The Police and pop groups like Culture Club adopting the same formula. And the world was fascinated by Grace's music, but even more intrigued by her unforgettable look. The stern, powerful face with the high cheekbones and threatening stare. As a kid, I found her very scary and didn't care so much for her music, and I could never understand what all the fuss was all about. It took me years, but over time, I came to appreciate the incredible musical landmarks that she put out. Her music was the cutting-edge revolutionary fusion of various genres, all built on a flawless reggae foundation that's since been considered among the high points of 20th century music. Grace Jones will take her place in the pantheons of legends on the strength of her first 3 albums for Island Records. And though her phenomenal songwriting and voice was a part of the equation, it would never have come to life without the spectacular Masterclass by the great Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare, both leading the line. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, And until next time, Jah bless.